Hi, in this video we will demo how to build a three-statement financial model or a pro forma model on Continental Resources. I'm going to go out to sec.gov/Edgar, and that will take me to the government website where I can download the Excel versions of the financial statements. Go to Company Filing Search, and I will type in the ticker, which is CLR. And it will pull up a list to choose from. I'm going to choose this one. And then filter by 10K. Hit enter, or probably return on a Mac to apply that filter. And then I can see the most recent filing date was in February of 2020. And the second most recent is February of 2019. I'm going to click on Enter Active Data to download each of those, because in part of this demo we are going to look at how to combine those. Once it takes me to this side, I want to hit View Excel Document, and that will actually download the file that I can click on and open in Excel. And if I right click over here between these two arrows, I can see a list of all the worksheets in this workbook, and you can tell that it's a couple dozen or more, maybe 3 or 4 dozen, and it's got one worksheet for every table in the 10K. And I'm looking in this case for balance sheets, and there are a couple here that look pretty perspective, and I'm also looking for income statement. And honestly, none of that looks too perspective. Let's do the balance sheet first. If I go to the consolidated balance sheets, I see things like assets and something like total assets, and then liabilities, equity, and then a line like total liabilities and equity. And if I compare total liabilities and equity to total assets, I see that the numbers match. That's how balance sheets work. So I know that this is the balance sheet, and that this parenthetical balance sheet on the next sheet was just a distractor. We want to ignore all that stuff. While we're at it, let's look around for an income statement. The next tab is Consolidated Statements of Comprehensive Income. That sounds pretty good. It starts with some income, takes out some expenses, and ends up with a net income. And that's how we know that this is actually our income statement. Now, they called it Statement of Comprehensive Income. Don't let that fool you on a different company who may actually have a separate tab for that. It so happens that Continental Resources includes some other comprehensive income on this same statement, but most companies would keep that on a separate tab. And instead of calling it a Statement of Comprehensive Income for their real income statement, they would call it a Consolidated Statement of Operations or something like that, or income. The word comprehensive usually is a distractor, but with Continental, it's actually the right one. So we'll use this one. So I'm going to go back and choose the balance sheet and the income statement. I selected them both at the same time by holding down the Control key. I'm going to right-click, move or copy, create a copy in a new book. And now I have this new book called Book 1, and it has the balance sheet and the income statement. I'm going to Alt-Tab back over to Edgar, go back, and this time I'm going to choose the second most recent. Click on Interactive Data, get the Excel document, open it, and do the same thing. Take the balance sheet and the income statement, right-click, move or copy, create a copy. I also want to put these in Book 1. I'm going to move them to the end. And so now I have this file Book 1 with 1, 2, 3, 4 sheets in it. That's great. I'm going to start by taking the balance sheet. I'll move this over by this one. Take the newer balance sheet. I'm going to go Control End and then Control Shift Home. And that is an easy way to select all of the used cells or the used range on this spreadsheet. Control X to copy, Control Page Down to go to the next page. Right arrow a few times, Control V to paste, and look what happened. It wrapped some of these longer labels. So while that's selected, I'll do an Alt H to get to the Home ribbon, and then a W to click on this Wrap Text. And now these no longer wrap, but the columns aren't wide enough, so I'll do an Alt H for the home menu, O for this format, and I for auto fit column width. Now it made some of these particularly wide, probably wider than we wanted. So I'm going to click on column E and narrow it back to something reasonable right here. And now I have the most recent balance sheet and the second most recent balance sheet. What I'd like to do is combine those into one. So before I forget, I'm going to come over here, right click, and delete this empty sheet. This becomes my balance sheet. Let's just say BS for short. And then let's work our way down this list saying what is equal to what else. So this line is current assets, cash and equivalents. We don't match here, so what happened? Looks like my 644,107 of crude oil and natural gas sales is the same as this 644,107 of crude oil and natural gas sales. So what I'm going to do is select those three with Shift and arrow, and then Control Shift plus and enter so that I can shift the cells down. And now I have these on the same row. So rather than get into a financial accounting tutorial, I'm just going to work my way down this with the sound off, and we'll see what the results look like when I finish. Okay, I took a stab at it. Let's see how close I got. If I come to cell D2 and propose to Excel that equals A2 is equal to E2, it will tell me if that's true or false. In this case, it told me it was true. If I copy that down a couple, so okay, those two match as well, but those two don't match, and that's because I had to insert that blank row here, and it doesn't match. So I could continue this down with true false, but notice if I take a true false, whether it's true or false, if I wrap it in parentheses and do some math to it, like add 0, then it becomes a 1 or a 0. And that's a little bit easier to look for. What's even easier to look for is if instead of adding 0, I would multiply by 1,000. And then, if I paste that down, then the thousands stand out, the zeros don't. So we could take this a step further. One thing I kind of like to do sometimes is, instead of multiplying by that, let's subtract 1. And what that will give me is a 0 or a negative 1. So do you see any benefit to that? The benefit to that would be if I were to copy it all the way down. And I could look down here in this little sum thing, and if you don't have sum, right click and click on sum to check that box. And it would tell me, okay, you have a sum of -8 in there. Well, that tells me that I have 8 rows that don't match. I don't really need to know that it's 8, but if I wanted to look and see if it was 0, then I'd be sure that I didn't overlook any of these. But anyway, let's look at those 8 and see what they were. So receivables, that was simply a header that was missing, no worries. Affiliated parties, I have no idea what that is, but it's in the 5th significant figure out here compared to some of these bigger numbers. So I'm going to end up lumping it into something called other at some point, so I'm not going to give it any thought whatsoever. Now this one's a little bit bigger. This is still maybe in the 4th significant figure, but still operating lease right of use assets. Well, I could read the 10K and the management discussion and analysis, and probably the notes to the 10K would be the best to find out what that is. But for our purposes today, I think we can just think, well, maybe they took an asset and set up some kind of an operating lease to it, perhaps to free up their balance sheet a little bit and affect some of their ratios. I'll bet that comes up again. And then over here I have payments to affiliated parties, which is a little strange that I have that in 2018 on this filing, but not on this filing. I would suspect over here it got lumped into some kind of other thing. Over here I have more on the operating leases. More on the operating leases. And why don't these match? The numbers match. I've got 3760 in 2018 and 3760 in 2018 on both filings. But the labels are a little bit different, and it's because these labels were addressing some share counts for the years 2018 and 2017. This label was addressing some share counts for 2019 and 2018. So it's simply a labeling issue here. We're not too worried about that. Accumulated other comprehensive. Okay, over here we called it a loss, and over here we called it an income. Now that could be a little bit confusing if 415 is an income, but over here a positive 415 is a loss. So when we do our subtotals, we're going to want to come back and pay close attention to that. And those are the only labels that didn't match. So I think of all those, I feel most comfortable with the most recent ones. However, where there were blank, I'm going to copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste. And now I have the most recent labels in column E, so I want to use that. So if I'll do a control space, control X, move over here, control space, control shift plus, control space, control minus. Now I have gotten rid of the old labels that we didn't care to use. I'm going to go ahead and control space and get rid of this with a control minus. And now I've got the older filing and the newer filing. Before I get rid of that comparison column, let's compare the older number to the newer number. Copy, paste. And we have 5 that didn't match. Let's see which 5 didn't match. Well, here we talked about that terribly small 73. This is kind of a distraction for us. We'll ignore that. But if we're going to keep that line, I think I'm going to move that over here. It's going to mess up the math, but that's okay. We'll come back to that. Joint interest and other. Looks like they had 36,308 in their most recent filing, but 368,308 in the most recent filing, 368,325 in the previous filing. So I think if we ended up going with this column, then I can live with that slight discrepancy. We'll just have to make sure our totals add up. See what the next one was. Here again, probably a very slight restatement from this number to this number, and from this number to this number, and another one to 0. I think I might go ahead and copy that over. These are such small numbers, it's almost meaningless. If we're going to have a line item for it, let's keep a number for it. Okay, and I think that takes care of all those discrepancies. So we're going to go with this as kind of our source of the truth, and I'm going to control space, control minus to get rid of this one. Control space, control minus. Now I have a 2017, a 2019 out of order, and a 2018. So let me control space, control X, control space, control, which I didn't really need to do. I could have just done a control shift plus, and since it was the entire column, it knew to rearrange those two. So now we have a balance sheet with 17, 18, and 19. The next step, I'm going to go get an income statement, but notice it's going to have 17, 18, and 19, and over here we're going to add 16. So what's going to happen? We're going to put these all in the same spreadsheet. Oops, balance sheet. Put these all in the same worksheet, and we'll need some space for that 2016. I'm going to make it now in case I forget to point out later that we need it, because we sure want the 17, 18, and 19 to add to align. And since we're going to have one additional column in the income statement than we have right here in the balance sheet, we'll just leave blanks here in the balance sheet. So I'm going to turn off the sound and do the same thing I did with the balance sheet. These matched up so well, I probably should have done the formula first. See what didn't match. Here we had a gain-loss on both crude oil and natural gas derivatives, but over here only on natural gas derivatives. Tells me that probably in 2016 they had some oil hedges, but they didn't have any oil hedges after that, And so when 2016 rolled off of their reporting, they only needed to talk about natural gas derivatives and not crude oil derivatives. Similarly, over here, all three of the years on this statement were income, but in the previous reporting, there was actually 1 year of loss back in 2016, so they had to say income loss. Now, if I'm going to keep this one, I always keep the most up-to-date. I might want to just go ahead and copy that over to here. Same thing here. And then it looks like in 2019, which didn't show up on this filing, they had a release of cumulative translation adjustments. So they had a number in a place where they hadn't had any reporting before. So we'll keep that one. Now let's go ahead and compare the numbers. So we'll look at 2018 versus 2018. Copy, paste. And it looks like there were no discrepancies there. That's great. Let's look at 2017 versus 2017. Copy, paste. Or another way I could have done that would be hit F2 and Control Enter. I believe that works on a Mac as well. Let's double check it. Comparing 17 to 17. Highlight all those, and it says that all the numbers in this column were identical to the numbers in this column. And then we confirm that all the numbers in this column were identical to the numbers in this column. So what I could do is come in here, select these with Shift right to right, Control space, Control my. Oh, didn't want to do that. Why did that happen? Why, when I selected those, Control space, did it reach out here and grab this extra one? It's because these cells are merged. So Control 1, or if you're on a Mac, I think the way to get there is Home, Alignment. Go to Alignment and unmerge those cells. Then I'll bet I can come in here, Shift, right, Control space, Control minus, get rid of our comparison column, Control space, Control X, and then over here, if I try to paste anywhere but the top row, it won't let me do it. But notice that I've got on my clipboard now this entire column, so if I'll go up to the top row and hit Control V to paste, then it will move it over here. Not Control V to paste, let's do Control Shift plus to paste insert, and then it moves it and scoots everything back to the left. So now we have 19, 18, 17, and 16. I'd love to sort those left to right, Shift, right, Control space, and it let me do it that time. I've still got some merged cells here. Let's see if it lets me sort. And I do Alt DS to sort, but if you want to use the menu, I don't know the shortcut for this one. It's probably Alt H, and then whatever letter gets you there, and then custom sort. Once you get to the sort dialog box, hit Options, sort left to right, and we want to sort by row 2. Let's see if it's going to let us with that merged cell. It's not going to do it. So let's hit Control 1, Alt M to get up to this merge, Alt M again to unmerge everything, and then Enter. And I'll use my shortcut, which is Alt DS, to get to the sort. I'm going to Alt O to get to that button. And I'm already on left to right. And tab a couple times to get down here and sort by row 2. Now I'd like to say oldest to newest, but it's looking at these and giving me the choice of A to Z. I can live with that. Let's see what happens. Okay, so now I have 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019. Just cut and paste that over there to look a little bit better. Gonna select those with Shift arrow, Alt H O I. And now we have the income statement. So let's call that IS. And in fact, we're just going to combine these. So we'll go back and get the balance sheet with Control End. Now look, it remembers that these other cells were used. You'd think it would take me right there, but we had deleted some things since we saved this file. Watch, if I hit Save, and now I hit Control End, it does take me to this cell. While I'm here, I'm going to Shift Left, Alt H O I, Control End, Shift Control Home, Control X, Control Page Down, come down here, and paste the balance sheet. Now, as I said before, look, we have 16 through 19 on the income statement, but on the balance sheet, we only have 17 through 19. So it's a good thing that we inserted these cells, and now we have a blank space on the balance sheet, so everything lines up nicely. Our next step is going to be to simplify these line items, check the math, and get them into a template that we can build a model with.